The silence in our bedroom was too perfect, too staged. Her dress from last night was crumpled on the floor, smelling like someone else's cologne, not mine. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching her sleep like nothing had happened. One leg out from under the blanket, mouth slightly open, like she hadn't just detonated a grenade in our marriage. I didn't sleep. Not a second. I didn't need to, not after what I found in her purse. She got home at 2:41 a.m. I know because I stared at the clock as the headlights swept across our window. I didn't rush downstairs. I wanted to see what she'd do. She came in humming some song I didn't recognize. Then she paused when she saw the light on in the hallway. I could hear her tiptoeing, heels in hand, phone still buzzing. She never checked the kitchen counter, never noticed I'd moved her purse. I had placed it right where it had been before, right down to the zipper angle. But I wasn't stupid enough to think she'd left it unguarded. Danica never let that thing out of her sight lately. It went with her to the bathroom. She'd sleep with it clutched tighter than she held my hand. But last night, she was drunk, or pretending to be, and that purse was an open book. There was a napkin in there, black ink, a name, a time, a room number, and a hotel key card. Not just any hotel, either. The Meriton Grand, a place we'd once splurged on for our anniversary, before she started rolling her eyes every time I kissed her shoulder. She never said a word when she came home, just crawled into bed like I didn't exist. I didn't speak either. I just sat in the dark and waited for the sun to remind us both that pretending is a lot harder in daylight. This morning, I slid the purse an inch toward her sleeping body. And in 2 hours, she's going to wake up, open it, and realize the key card is gone. Guess where I am right now? Yeah, I'm already at the Meriton Grand. And you wouldn't believe what I just saw in the hotel's guest log. I didn't think I'd actually walk through the lobby doors. I thought my legs would shake too hard, or guilt would swallow me whole before I reached the front desk. But adrenaline makes you bold in the worst ways. I kept replaying that hotel key card in my hand. Smooth, cold, mocking me. The Meriton Grand wasn't a place people stayed at by accident. You booked it to celebrate something, or to hide something. The lobby smelled like citrus and money. Polished marble floors, giant chandelier, fake smiles on every employee. I felt painfully out of place, standing there in yesterday's wrinkled t-shirt with bags under my eyes big enough to qualify as luggage. I approached the desk, trying to look like I belonged, which I absolutely didn't. My voice cracked when I spoke. Of course it did. Hiya. I was supposed to meet my wife here. Danica Holloway. Could you check if she checked in last night? I'm worried she might have gotten the wrong room. Total lie, but I'd rehearsed it 37 times in the car. The clerk typed something on her computer, paused, then squinted like she'd just found a typo. We have a Danica Holloway registered, yes. Checked in at 11:52 p.m. My stomach clenched. Not because her name was there, I already knew that, but because the clerk's eyes didn't move from the screen. She was reading more. She said quietly, "There's also a second name linked to the reservation." I felt every muscle in my body lock into place. My throat dried. My palms burned. She lowered her voice, barely above a whisper, like she knew she was about to gut me. It says, Danica Holloway and guest. The guest name is Arthur Lane. Arthur, a name I'd never heard her say, a name that didn't belong to any of her co-workers, family members, or friends. A name that sounded too practiced, too deliberate. I felt dizzy, like someone had tilted the entire room and forgotten to warn me. Is she still checked in? I asked. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded smaller, almost fragile. The clerk nodded. Yes, the room is still active. They haven't checked out. That word felt like a punch to the ribs. I walked away before she could offer anything else. I didn't trust my face not to break. I found a quiet corner near the elevators and sat down, hoping the floor might swallow me. I shouldn't have come. I knew that. But something was pulling me forward. Curiosity, stupidity, maybe hope. The pathetic kind that refuses to die even when everything else does. The elevators dinged. People laughed, dragging suitcases, talking about brunch. And there I was gripping my wife's key card so hard it bent. I don't know what got into me. Maybe I'd finally snapped. Maybe I wanted the truth more than I wanted my dignity. But I stood up, walked toward the elevator, and pressed the button for the 7th floor, the number printed on the card sleeve. The doors opened. The hallway was quiet. Soft carpet. Dim lights. Room 714 stood at the far end, doors slightly ajar. My heart thundered in my ears. Someone was inside. Voices. A man's and a woman's. Not loud, but familiar enough that I felt the blood drain from my face. Her voice. Danica. I stepped closer, my hand lifted on instinct, ready to push the door open. Then I froze, because the man inside wasn't speaking intimately. He sounded angry, frantic, even. And what he said next wasn't something I ever expected to hear. Not from a stranger, not in a hotel room, not connected to my wife. He said, "If your husband finds out what you did, you know it won't just ruin your marriage. It'll ruin everything." I staggered back, my breath caught in my throat. Whatever I thought this was, whatever I suspected, I was wrong. This was something else entirely. Something bigger. Something she never meant for anyone to know. And I was standing 2 feet away from the secret she'd rather burn our life down than tell me. I stood there like a fool, halfway between escape and explosion. Every instinct in me screamed to turn around, run, pretend I never heard that man's voice. But I didn't move. I couldn't. Not after hearing him mention me. My name, slipping through that crack in the door like a knife. "You think Albert's just going to sit at home forever while you dance around this mess?" The man, Arthur, growled. "You promised this would be handled." I don't know how long I stood there before my knees remembered how to function. My heart wasn't just racing, it was sprinting without me. I leaned closer, not thinking, just reacting. That's when the door creaked open another inch on its own. I froze. No one had touched it. It just moved, as if the hotel itself wanted me to hear more. Danica's voice came next. Soft, low, stressed in a way I hadn't heard in years. Not angry, not seductive, but terrified. "I didn't think he'd come here," she whispered. "He wasn't supposed to know about the party, let alone the key card." Arthur snapped. "Well, guess what? You're sloppy. You left it in your purse. You were drunk. And now he's probably putting it all together." I felt sick. They were plotting, not sneaking around, not an affair of chance. This was deliberate, orchestrated. My wife had been hiding more than a fling. This was something coordinated, something I wasn't even close to understanding. Then she said it. "Do you have the files or not?" "Files." Arthur sighed. "They're encrypted. And if your little husband decides to get curious, we've got a problem bigger than your marriage." My head spun. This wasn't just infidelity. This wasn't about a one-night stand or some flirtation at work. They were hiding something. Something with files. Something they couldn't afford for me to see. Something that could apparently ruin everything. I backed away from the door slowly, heart pounding louder than my footsteps. I couldn't be there when they came out. I needed time to think. I needed to get out of that hotel before I lost control and did something that would get me in trouble. As I reached the elevator, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost dropped it. It was a text from Danica. "Morning, babe. Hope you're sleeping in. I might get breakfast on my way back. Red heart." I stared at it like it was a joke. Like she hadn't just been conspiring in room 714 about how to keep me in the dark. I didn't reply. I walked straight out of the Meriton Grand, into the daylight that somehow felt darker than anything behind that hotel door. But as soon as I got in my car, I knew one thing. I wasn't going to sleep. I wasn't going to cry. And I wasn't going to yell. I was going to investigate. And the first thing I was going to do was clone her phone. I'd never done anything like this before. Never snooped through her phone. Never tracked her. Never even checked our shared iCloud logins, though I knew how. I always thought snooping was beneath me. That if I had to dig through someone's life, the relationship was already dead. But that morning, sitting in my car outside the Meriton Grand, I realized the relationship was dead. I just hadn't buried it yet. So I drove home. Didn't slam doors. Didn't leave dramatic notes. Just waited. When Danica got back an hour later, she acted like she was returning from a yoga retreat. Cheerful. Relaxed. Smiling with that same smugness I saw the night before. She even brought me coffee. From my favorite place. "Didn't want to wake you," she said, setting it beside me. "Thought you could use a treat." I thanked her. Like an idiot. Then I watched her take a shower while her phone stayed charging on the nightstand. Unlocked. Open. Vulnerable for once. I mirrored it to my laptop in 30 seconds flat. I didn't even feel guilty. The version of me that might have hesitated was gone. Replaced by a man sitting in sweatpants with dry lips and trembling hands, combing through every corner of her digital life. That's when I found the hidden folder. It was buried deep in her Files app, named something generic, Work Docs. I almost skipped it, but curiosity, or paranoia, pushed me to open it. Inside were screenshots. Lots of them. Text conversations between her and Arthur. But not the kind I expected. These weren't just flirty or romantic. They were strategic. Cold. Almost like business. One thread was titled, March Meeting Recap. Arthur had sent her a photo of what looked like a contract. Her response? He still doesn't know? If this leaks, I'll say he forged it. His name's nowhere. I stared at the image. It was a contract. It had my company's logo on the header. Now, for context, I'm not some CEO or big shot. I handle IT procurement at a mid-sized logistics firm. Boring stuff. Nothing shady. But recently, we'd had a breach. Nothing major, just flagged emails and some internal audits. I never thought it connected to Danica in any way. Until now. Another message. Once the system access is killed from his end, we wipe everything. Just make sure he doesn't get suspicious before Friday. Friday. That was today. I felt ice settle in my spine. My wife wasn't just cheating on me. She was using me, leveraging my job, my access, to do something. I still didn't know what, but it wasn't just personal betrayal anymore. This was dangerous and possibly illegal. I looked at the timestamps. These texts weren't from months ago. They were from this week, this morning. Then came the worst message of all. Arthur had written, he knows too much. If he starts asking questions, we handle it the same way we handled Liam. Liam? Who the hell was Liam? There were no other messages. Nothing that explained who he was, what they'd done, or what they meant by handle. I searched every folder, every hidden album, every note. But that was it. It was like hearing someone say, don't open the basement door, and realizing you're already standing on the stairs. I stared at her phone as the shower shut off. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. I mirrored the files to a USB drive and shoved everything under my desk before she came out, towel wrapped around her hair, humming like she hadn't just been planning something that could ruin both our lives. She asked what I was doing. I smiled. I said, just clearing out some files for work. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't confront her yet. Not without understanding who Liam was. Not without knowing how far this went. But I was going to find out, even if I had to risk everything. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. Danica curled up beside me like she had nothing in the world to worry about, like she hadn't been texting a man about handling me just hours earlier. Every time she shifted, I flinched. Every breath from her felt like a slow countdown to something I hadn't prepared for. Around 3 a.m., while she slept peacefully beside me, I booted up my laptop in the hallway and typed in a single name, Liam. I didn't expect much. It's a common name. But paired with Danica's and Arthur's, that narrowed it fast. And what I found was worse than I imagined. 3 months ago, a man named Liam Wexler filed a formal whistleblower complaint against a third-party tech contractor working with multiple logistics firms, including mine. The documents were sealed, but the leak was covered in a quiet little blog post from a tech journalist no one really follows. It said Liam discovered that internal data, client shipping manifests, route analytics, inventory counts, was being copied and transferred through back-end systems via someone on the inside. No one had been named, but there were suspicions. And then, just a few days after filing that complaint, Liam had an accident. Car crash. No foul play suspected. No follow-up. Case closed. Except now I knew Danica and Arthur had been involved in something with hidden files, encrypted documents, and someone they clearly needed to disappear. And they talked about Liam like he was a loose end they tied up. I felt sick. Because that meant I wasn't just being used. I was standing on the same tracks Liam had been shoved onto. The next morning, I kept pretending. Pretended to kiss her goodbye. Pretended to go to work. But instead, I drove to a cheap diner 2 towns over and opened my laptop again. I still had her mirrored phone data. I knew I had to dig deeper, but not just into her files. Into Arthur's. It took me hours to get through the layer of security he'd set up on the messaging app they used. But one message from Arthur finally cracked it open. A link to a shared cloud drive. Private. Password protected. And the name of the folder? Holloway Docs. My stomach dropped. That's our last name. The password was in the message thread, hidden as the timestamp from their first kiss, apparently. How poetic. I tried it. It worked. Inside were dozens of PDFs, client logs, VPN access codes, shipping data, company credentials. All of it looked like it had been siphoned from my company's systems. And my name? It was listed on every document as the account that downloaded the data. It was all traceable. To me, Arthur and Danica had used my login credentials, used my network permissions, used my position to get what they needed. And now they were setting me up to take the fall if anything blew up. If this ever went public, I'd be the one blamed for corporate espionage. Not them. But here's what Arthur didn't know, and what Danica forgot. I'm the one who installed our company's off-site redundancy system, and I still have access logs she didn't wipe. I copied everything to a second drive, created a backup hidden in a folder I emailed to myself from an anonymous account. I was done sitting around, hoping she wouldn't notice I was unraveling her lies. I wasn't going to expose her yet. No, first I needed to confront someone else. Because if Arthur had been willing to handle Liam, I needed to know how far he was willing to go for her. And I knew exactly where Arthur would be that night. Because Danica had a new dress laid out on the bed, and I'd seen the dinner reservation on her calendar. She wasn't taking me, but I was going to show up anyway. I'd never been to Bellavino before. It's one of those dimly lit, overpriced, boutique-type restaurants where everything is plated like it's afraid of commitment. The kind of place where people go to pretend their affairs are elegant. The perfect setting for two liars who wanted to celebrate whatever they thought they'd gotten away with. Danica told me she was going to a networking mixer. I didn't ask where. I just smiled and said, "Have fun." She didn't even look up from curling her hair. That alone told me everything I needed to know about how little she feared me. She'd grown so confident in the web she spun that she couldn't imagine anyone cutting through it. But I was done being quiet. I arrived at Bellavino 15 minutes early. I wore a black jacket she hadn't seen before and a baseball cap pulled low, just enough to blend in. The hostess gave me a strange look when I asked for a seat with a view of the terrace. I told her I was meeting someone. She didn't press. From my seat near the back corner, I had the perfect view of the glass doors leading to the private terrace. That's where they'd be. Danica always liked eating outside if it wasn't too windy, said it made the food feel more cinematic. Whatever that meant. At 7:06 p.m., I saw her. She stepped out onto the terrace like she belonged there. Red dress, new heels, hair done in soft curls. And behind her, walking casually like he wasn't the architect of my personal collapse, Arthur Lane. They didn't see me. Not yet. They sat, ordered wine, laughed. She touched his wrist once and leaned in like they were in some romance novel. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I didn't need to. I'd read their messages. I knew what they thought of me. He's harmless, Arthur once wrote. He'll believe anything. Funny how people stop believing once they have evidence. I waited until their entrees arrived, until their glasses were full, until the mood was perfect. Then I stood up, walked slowly to the glass doors, and opened them like I had a reservation out there. Danica looked up first. She blinked once, then again, slower, like her brain was buffering. Arthur turned his head, chewing mid-bite, then stopped. I'll never forget the color draining from his face, like he was staring at a ghost. I pulled up the chair beside them without asking. Sat down, smiled. Danica was frozen. Albert, what are you doing here? Funny, I said. I was about to ask you the same thing. Thought you had a work mixer? Arthur tried to speak, but all that came out was a nervous cough. I pulled the USB from my jacket pocket and set it gently on the table between their wine glasses. Just thought you should both know, I continued. The files you tried to pin on me? I've got duplicates stored in 3 different places. One with a lawyer, one with the company's security chief, and one, well, that's just for insurance. Danica's face was pale. Her jaw clenched. You went through my phone. I went through your life. I snapped, voice still low, still calm. Because I had no idea how deep the betrayal ran until I saw the receipts. I thought you were cheating. Turns out, you were framing me for federal crimes. Arthur tried to regain some composure. You have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, I leaned forward. Then maybe you should explain the encrypted documents. Or why you texted her to handle Liam the same week he drove off a cliff. A full 10 seconds passed. Neither of them blinked. Then Arthur stood up. Fast. We're done here. But Danica grabbed his sleeve. Sit down, she said. Her voice wasn't gentle anymore. And that was the moment I knew. She wasn't in control of this either. She had lost the grip. The plan was falling apart. People at nearby tables were starting to stare. Arthur pulled away from her. I told you this would happen. I told you he was too quiet, too careful. Danica stood next. Albert, we can talk about this. No, I said. You had your chance. I left the USB on the table and walked out without turning back. Let them scramble. Let them panic. Because I had already emailed my boss and set a meeting for the next morning. And by the time the sun rose, the person Danica underestimated the most would become the one who ends everything she built with lies. I arrived at the office an hour early, USB in hand, anxiety coiled so tight in my chest I thought I might be sick. My boss, Mr. Blevins, had agreed to meet with me privately before our Friday morning team call. He didn't ask questions, just said, "Come in early, we'll talk." The moment I stepped into the building, it felt like every light overhead was a spotlight, and every glance from a coworker held suspicion. But the surprise didn't come from inside the office. It came from outside, just 20 minutes before my meeting. Danica was standing near the elevators, holding 2 cups of coffee. She looked calm, poised, like this was just some marriage hiccup we could iron out over breakfast. "I figured we should talk first," she said, her voice low, sweet, rehearsed. "Before you do anything you can't take back." I didn't touch the coffee. I didn't smile. "You're not supposed to be here." "I'm your wife," she replied, as if the title still held weight. "You're going to ruin your life. Do you really think Blevins is going to believe you, after what Arthur showed him?" That stopped me cold. "What?" She stepped closer. "Arthur already met with your company's legal team. This morning, he gave them a drive with files showing your login history, your signature on internal exports. You're already under review. The only reason you haven't been locked out yet is because they're verifying the timestamps." I stared at her, trying to process. She smirked. "We're smarter than you, Albert. You should have just kept your mouth shut." For a second, I almost broke. I really did. Everything I'd planned shattered before I could even reach the meeting room. But then I remembered something. Something she didn't know. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened an app, a screen recording log. Then I hit play. Danica's voice came pouring out, loud and crystal clear. "You're going to ruin your life. Do you really think Blevins is going to believe you, after what Arthur showed him?" Her eyes widened. She looked down at my phone, stunned. "I've been recording since I walked in," I said quietly. "And now I have you admitting that Arthur forged those files." She lunged to grab the phone, but I stepped back. "You just gave me exactly what I needed," I added. "Now get out. And if I see you near my job again, the next place you visit will be a courtroom." Her face twisted into something I'd never seen before. Not guilt, not fear, just rage. She said nothing as she walked away. I didn't stop her, because in 5 minutes, I was going to sit down with my boss, play every message, every recording, every login timestamp, and flip this whole thing upside down. I walked into Mr. Blevins' office with shaking hands, but a steady voice. I didn't need to exaggerate, plead, or get emotional. I just calmly set the USB on the table, opened my laptop, and pulled up the recordings. 10 minutes in, he stopped me. "That's enough," he said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "You're telling me your wife and this Arthur Lane used your access credentials to extract internal data, then planned to frame you for the breach?" "I'm not just telling you," I replied, sliding over the printed backup of the server logs. "I'm proving it. These are remote access timestamps. My credentials, yes, but from IP addresses I've never used. Someone cloned my login from outside the building. IT should be able to confirm it." He nodded slowly. "And this audio?" She admitted Arthur came to us first. "That's right. I figured they'd try to spin the narrative before I had a chance." Blevins leaned back in his chair, quiet for a moment. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You've been loyal to this company for 9 years. I believe you. Let us handle the rest." By noon, Arthur Lane's access to our company's systems had been revoked. Legal contacted him for follow-up. He didn't answer. By 3 p.m., news came down that external counsel had opened a formal investigation into third-party breaches linked to his firm. The guy vanished before dinner. No one's seen him since. As for Danica, that evening, she came home to a quiet apartment, and divorce papers sitting on the kitchen table, right beside her favorite perfume bottle. She called me 27 times that night, left voicemails that shifted from denial to anger to begging. I didn't respond. She tried coming by. I didn't open the door. And finally, she stopped. It's been 6 weeks. I've since transferred to a new department, got a quiet promotion, and even moved into a smaller apartment across town with my dog, Thimble. It's nothing fancy, but there's peace here. And no locked purses. No fake smiles. No secrets being whispered behind glass doors. Just me, my freedom, and the deep, satisfying relief that comes from surviving a storm you didn't even know you were caught in. Let Danica keep her lies. Let Arthur keep running. I kept the truth. And in the end, that was all I needed.